Hello, it's wonderful to be back in Brazil, even virtually, with all my friends across the entire country. IAB Brazil and IAB US have had a wonderful relationship for so many years. So I want to thank you for your leadership in Latin America and the world. I'm proud to be back, I believe for the second time over the past several years, to present the IAB's ongoing work on the state of brand disruption in the United States and the world. This is the fourth year that we've done our annual report on changes in the consumer brand ecosystem. Our goal has been to provide brand, media, advertising, retail, and technology executives with a deeper understanding of how brands are born, how they thrive, and why some of them die in a value chain that has been undergoing rapid revolutionary change. It's been IAB's research over the past 5 years that has introduced into the language the concept of the direct brand economy. My presentation today uses US data because that is what I know best, and it is accurate through the middle of 2021. And now, as you might imagine, there was a great acceleration of the direct brand economy during 2021 because COVID kept so many of us out of brick and mortar stores, but it also introduced us both to new ways of shopping and also to new brands. At IAB, we will be introducing our new annual brand disruption report this November with new data and new news. So stay tuned because there will be more of this to come. But first, let me give you some background on what we're talking about, especially for those of you who haven't seen some of this research before. Indirect brands dominated the economy in the period beginning in 1879. That's when Procter & Gamble invented ivory soap. And these indirect brands dominated roughly through 2010. Direct brands, which is to say most consumer brands, created value by dominating owned and operated, capital-intensive, integrated supply chains. They extracted value through a series of third-party handoffs from the brand to publishers and ultimately to retailers, because retailers owned all the consumer relationships and thus all consumer sales. These third-party retailers were the essential link between brands and consumers. As recently as 1995, 97% of all retail sales in the United States took place inside brick and mortar retailers. Brand prosperity during this period depended on a company's ability to dominate really two supply chains. There was the supply chain that created and distributed goods and services. That's represented on the left of this slide. And there was the supply chain that generated awareness for goods and services. That's depicted in the sweep to the right. Dominating both these high barrier to entry supply chains gave 20th century brands defenses that were so strong that in most categories, the top brands in the 1920s remained the top brands through at least the 1980s. Now, beginning around 2010, that's the year Warby Parker was founded, direct brands began to break through. Changes in the industrial infrastructure in the US and across the world had made once hard to access enterprise functions available to even the smallest firms. Direct brands create value through a low barrier, capital flexible, leased or rented supply chain. We call this the stack your own supply chain. And they extract value primarily through the direct relationships they forge between the company and its end consumers. So in effect, the direct brand supply chain is the exact opposite of the indirect brand supply chain that had dominated for the better part of 120, 130 years. Since the publication of our first study almost 5 years ago, the world has come to recognize the disruptive face of these upstart brands using this stack your own supply chain. What I'm going to show you today is how the COVID pandemic massively accelerated the growth of the direct brand economy and how COVID reinforced the conditions that enabled its growth. In other words, there's no turning back. This is the new consumer economy. This is how it works. This is its shape. How much has COVID sped up the transition to a direct brand economy? Well, it collapsed 5 years of activity into a single year. That is, the transition of physical shopping to digital shopping has been about 5 times faster in 2020 and 2021 so far than in any previous period. We call this new paradigm storelessness. Brick and mortar store closures in the US topped 25,000 last year, nearly 3 times the record from the year before. More than half those shutterings were in shopping malls. Among the most notable bankruptcies in 2020, going into 2021, were Century 21, Brooks Brothers, JCPenney, and Neiman Marcus. Many of these are global retail names. At the same time, digital retail spending was up 30% through the second quarter of 2020, and it reached $347 billion. From April through June, 1 out of every $5 spent at retail came from orders placed in digital stores. According to Adobe Analytics, 2019 had only $2 billion sales days outside of the holiday season. What that means is there were only 2 days in the United States, other than holidays, where more than $2 billion in goods were sold. By August of 2020, the first year of the pandemic, there were already 130 $2 billion sales days. Every day from May to the end of June in 2020 was a $2 billion sales day. Digital shopping's share of the economy, the share shift, has been breathtaking. According to US Department of Commerce data, e-commerce sales made up 16% of total US retail spending in 2019. Today, e-commerce constitutes more than 25% of all retail sales. So there's been almost a 10 percentage point shift, a 10-point share shift in just 1 year. That's after shares have been shifting less than 2 points per year for the better part of a decade. Will people continue to shop virtually even when public health returns to normal? Every survey indicates an emphatic yes, and in fact, we're seeing that now that COVID is easing in many parts of the world. Research by McKinsey projects that virtually every consumer category will experience 15 to 45% growth in permanent online shopping. Most of these categories are now becoming majority digital. That is, more consumers are now shopping in digital stores than are relying exclusively on physical stores. Now, to be sure, the pandemic has been very good for the world's largest legacy consumer-facing companies like Procter & Gamble and Unilever. With their legacy of consumer trust and their wide retail dispersion, they saw enormous growth over the first year and a half of the pandemic, especially in their stock market valuations. But don't let this distract you from the broader trends. The more that consumers conduct their lives in digital environments, the more conditions favor direct brand disruptors over indirect brand incumbents. The first reason is simply the supply of awareness. Digital media have made it extraordinarily less burdensome than legacy media for smaller and newer brands to find their audiences. In the competition for eyeballs, many more companies can take the digital playing field than are able to compete on the traditional media playing field. This democratization of competition is reflected inside the stores themselves. In the 150 years when brick and mortar retailers controlled consumers' access to brands, relatively few companies could benefit. In the theoretically unlimited shelf space offered by digital stores, more brands can find a place. The cosmetics industry in the US is a very good example. Data from Nielsen show that the top 20 cosmetics brands account for 96% of all sales in traditional retail outlets, such as department stores and national cosmetic chains like Sephora. By contrast, in e-commerce channels, small companies comprise 86% of all sales. If there's one lesson you should take away from this study and from the years of study that IAB has been doing about direct brands, it's this. As the shelves grow larger and longer, smaller and newer brands become more competitive. This is true across categories. For example, in 2019, brick and mortar pet food sales were flat, while online sales grew 35%. One of the biggest beneficiaries was Chewy. It was founded only in 2011, just 10 years ago, and it was acquired by PetSmart in 2017. Today, Chewy is now a more than $5 billion brand. Or consider the home furnishings category. In 2019, consumer spending on furniture and bedding increased only 2.8%. Wayfair's net revenue increased 35%. It's now a $9 billion revenue company. It's 6 times larger than Crate & Barrel, which is the largest furniture retailer in the United States. Largest furniture retailer in brick and mortar in the United States. We saw many first wave disruptor brands expand their offerings during the pandemic. For example, the D2C hair coloring pioneer Madison Reed saw its home products with a 78% gross margin increase 10 to 12 times during the early part of the quarantine. Now, this is fascinating because people were indoors. They couldn't go out. And yet here is a hair coloring brand that's seeing a 10 to 12 time spike in its sales during the quarantine. So what Madison Reed did is it moved its 100 salon employees to call centers, and it also introduced a men's hair coloring line. Big brands also used the pandemic to quicken their transition to storelessness. Most of their activity until now had been centered on passive investing, using incubators and other financial mechanisms to enter into partnerships or learning mode about how to become storeless. But in 2020 and then heading into 2021, we saw broader and more active instantiation of capabilities in the enterprise. For example, Colgate launched an in-app shop where consumers can purchase a new smart electric toothbrush and associated products. This online-only brand is called Hum by Colgate. AB InBev, the global brewing giant, introduced a new direct-to-consumer web shop, allowing for next-day delivery. Ocean Spray introduced Atoka, a line of plant-based beverages available only through its online site. Some big brands are going much, much further. Nike has been leading the transition from indirect brand to direct brand for well more than a decade. It announced a year ago what it called its consumer direct acceleration strategy. The footwear giant said it was closing 9 wholesale accounts and doubling down on D2C and its owned and operated stores. Nike said it expects digital sales to account for 30% of its revenues this year, 2021. That's 2 years ahead of what it had originally envisioned. Nike's moves reflect its recognition that first-party data harvested from owned and operated digital and physical stores lies at the heart of its business. The company intends to use first-party data for everything from inventory management to consumer experience. First-party data, in effect, is the competitive edge for direct brands. As subscription-based revenue fell during the early days of COVID, Stitch Fix used its first-party subscriber data models on non-subscribers. This helped the company initiate a new direct buy program that allowed new customers to make one-off purchases without committing to a full subscription. Stitch Fix's direct buy revenues grew 3 times during that period, and its stock surged 50% over the course of the year. That said, a good deal of the move to emphasize first-party data is defensive. It's premised on what most believe is the pending loss of access to cookie-based third-party data, and it's also linked to maintaining the effectiveness of the brand's advertising. IAB research has found that a combination of trends, including the rise of storeless shopping, government privacy regulations in the US and outside the US, and browser and operating system restrictions on cookies, are prompting 60% of marketers to stress invest in first-party data. We're expecting that number will grow much, much larger over the course of 2021 when we come out with the final figures. We think that the overwhelming majority of marketers now are looking for ways to shift from reliance on third-party data to first-party data. So stay tuned for more information about that. The offensive and defensive requirements for first-party data also are reflected in brand demand for consumer data platforms, or CDPs. Adobe, Oracle, SAP, and Salesforce all announced the launch of CDPs as part of their marketing clouds during the past year. The North American CDP market is expected to triple by 2027, and we expect the rest of the world will follow very, very shortly thereafter in requiring help from CDPs. The advancement of data science in this way within consumer brands is one of the bigger developments of this period. Starbucks, another example of a real expert, long-time brand transitioning to direct brand. Starbucks is using big data and small data in everything from the development of the launch of products to real estate planning to curated menu creation. PepsiCo is using data-driven predictive analytics to improve cycle times and to drive more incremental innovation beyond line and flavor expansions. It's got new brands like Life Water and Bubbly in the water category, and Gatorade brand extensions, Zero and Bolt 24. They're all recent examples of this new initiative that's trying to put PepsiCo at the forefront of the direct brand economy. The lesson of all this is that brands are data companies that make things. Let me repeat that. Brands are data companies that make things. That's an inversion of the historic, strategic, and operating norms. So I've shown you how COVID accelerated so many of the trends in e-commerce and how the dramatic increase in digital shopping cascades down to brand development, consumer behaviors, and brand competitiveness. I want now to do a deeper look at how consumers are discovering brands and how brands are offering themselves up for discovery in the direct brand economy. The most important takeaway from the last IAB Brand Disruption report, which I hinted at before, is that 2 distinct supply chains are now collapsing into one: the brand production and distribution supply chain and the brand awareness supply chain. All the functions necessary for creating, marketing, and selling branded goods and services are now available as a service for would-be proprietors. But when you look specifically at marketing and selling, the COVID trends all point in one direction. The screen is the ad, and it is the content, and it is the store. Put another way, one medium can now take consumers from the top to the bottom of the purchase funnel. This is vital to understand because we believe it points inevitably to massive growth in directly shoppable media and advertising. Let me give you some more data about what's actually going on. The first department store that opened in the world was Bon Marché in Paris in 1852. Since that time, up until relatively recently, Stores were the center of all brand and product discovery in the developed world. Certainly, you could learn about brands and products from media advertising, but because these brands and products were only available in brick and mortar locations, stores determined what could be discovered and what could be acquired. 168 years of store-centered discovery are now coming to an end. The retailers themselves are decreeing that. The phrase BOPIS, B-O-P-I-S, stands for Buy Online, Pick Up in Store. Unsurprisingly, BOPIS surged during the pandemic. It was up 259% year on year as of last August. Among the top 500 retailers in the United States, 43% were offering BOPIS as of the middle of 2020. That was up from only 7% just 6% earlier. Retailers that introduced BOPIS options in 2020 included Walmart, Zara, Home Depot, Michaels, Macy's, Kohl's, Target, Petco, Gap, Old Navy, Aldi, Stop & Shop, and Whole Foods. Consumers, having been introduced to BOPIS, show no signs at all of returning to their old habits. Nearly 70% of consumers say that once the pandemic subsides, they will continue to shop and order online and pick up at curbside. Delivery options also exploded during the pandemic. In the United States, Target's SameDay Delivery, fulfilled in partnership with the third-party delivery company Shipt, grew 350% by the middle of 2020 and stayed at that level through the entire year. The company's drive-up service, also introduced in 2020, grew 700% for total growth in same-day possession, which I think is the important metric here. If you can buy online and get it the same day, same-day possession at Target increased 278% last year. Now in 2019, and I believe I gave the 2019 presentation at IAB Brazil. In 2019, IAB said that two-day shipping had become cost of entry for most businesses. Same-day delivery, we said, was the frontier. As of right now, we're telling you the frontier is now shifting from 2-hour delivery to 15-minute delivery in urban markets. That frontier is being settled. In May, Walmart in the US started offering customers a 2-hour delivery service in major markets called Express Delivery. And that was in competition with Amazon's Prime Now. But now we're seeing a whole series of startups offering 15 to 20-minute delivery in urban markets in the US. So look for that immediate gratification as being the next frontier for online shopping. These remarkable shifts in how and where shopping occur are literally transforming the retail landscape. As its online sales rose by 85%, Bed Bath & Beyond converted a quarter of its stores in the United States and Canada into regional fulfillment centers. It plans to expand that service to at least 200 additional stores. Best Buy is also converting 25% of its stores into shipping hubs, specifically designed to handle a higher volume of packages. The point of all this data is fairly simple. Brick and mortar stores increasingly are meant to enhance the digital shopping experience, not vice versa. So instead of the digital tail wagging the brick and mortar dog, it's now the brick and mortar tail wagging the digital dog. As shopping increasingly becomes a screen-based activity, naturally, so too does media consumption. And that consumption, more and more, is of interactive media, particularly video, but it also includes other things. So streaming video minutes climbed 74% year on year by the second quarter of 2020. Streaming video now accounts for more than 25% of all US video consumption, according to Nielsen. Helping to drive streaming video consumption is the remarkable rise of Twitch and other game streaming and esports platforms. Twitch's hours leapt 123% during the first half of 2020. It added 1 billion monthly viewing hours during the first several months of the pandemic. Streaming audio crossed a Rubicon during the pandemic in the US. It was up almost 20% by mid-year last year, and it had surpassed radio, and now accounts for the majority of all audio consumption in the United States, much more than radio. Social media usage by adults also was up more than 10% last year, climbing towards an hour and a half a day. When you step back from this confluence of attention to the screen and you ruminate on all these trends in consumption, you're really left with one remarkable conclusion, which I hinted at before. The medium, the playroom, the hangout, and the store are the same thing. Let me repeat it. The medium, the playroom, the hangout, and the store are now the same thing. The collapsing of the supply chains into each other, the brand production and distribution supply chain and the brand awareness supply chain, is the greatest driver of marketing innovation right now. McKinsey says that innovators in consumer experience emerge from recessions with 3 times the financial performance of experience laggards. With mobile e-commerce sales set to overtake desktop e-commerce between now and 2023, look for an eruption of investment and implementation that makes shopping more entertaining, more social, and more participatory, and also, as I said earlier, makes media more directly shoppable. The first trend to take root and sprout during 2020 and into 2021 was digital participation. In March of 2020, Nike announced that it was making its Nike Training Club app free for 90 days. Formerly, it had been a paid subscription app. Nike Training Club offers more than 185 workouts, along with tips and diet plans. As of the second quarter of last year, the global Nike Training Club community logged 50 million workouts and over 908 million active minutes. That led to triple-digit growth in the app's monthly active users. In July, exactly a year ago, seeing what the trends were and seeing how valuable this app was to its growth in consumer engagement and ultimately its growth in sales, Nike made it permanently free. Seeing the same trends also a year ago, Lululemon announced its $500 million acquisition of the digital fitness startup Mirror. Investments by retailers and brands in augmented reality tools are going to triple by 2025. These tools allow consumers to visualize clothing on their own bodies or furniture in their own homes, do a lot of other things. 2/3 of these investments are going towards mobile visualization tools. Amazon, for example, launched a mobile AR room decorator app a year ago, August 2020. Shopify, which introduced AR tools for its merchants in 2020, last year implemented augmented reality video. Conversion rates increased by 250% when consumers viewed 3D products, Shopify said. Live streaming broke decisively into the mainstream during the quarantine and turned into an essential force in e-commerce. Twitch has been a live stream pioneer, and it recorded 6.1 million simultaneous streams for its launch event for the Sony PlayStation 5 last June. By contrast, the most watched television network in the United States during the year was Fox News. It averaged 3.5 million primetime viewers a night. So already, just to again make the point as clearly as I can, Twitch is larger than the largest, by far. It's twice as large as the largest US television network. This year, worldwide live stream generated sales are expected to double to $120 billion as companies ranging from L'Oreal to General Mills take advantage of the shoppable medium. The ability to blend a social entertainment platform like live streaming with immediate shoppability is drawing more and more media into the mix. A year ago, TikTok announced a partnership with Teespring to allow creators to sell merchandise directly to fans. At the IAB Digital Content Newfronts this past year, Snapchat announced its first directly shoppable show. Titled The Drop, the show focuses on streetwear collaborations with celebrities and designers. I think it's fair to say that there is now a race toward shoppability. NBC Universal, one of the largest US television networks, last year introduced its shoppable ad format. This year, the company introduced NBC Universal Checkout. That's a new e-commerce engine that grants any business the ability to transform any piece of content on the NBC platform into an interactive, shoppable experience. Hulu similarly introduced a new direct response ad format to enable viewers to purchase brands while streaming. Smile Direct Club and Sweetgreen, the salad delivery store, were among the launch partners. Erie, the direct-to-consumer underwear brand that's owned by American Eagle Outfitters, tested the format, and it generated 25% higher returns on ad spend year on year and sales conversions that were 9 times better than its traditional media mix. IAB expects shoppable ad deployment to grow at least 20% in 2021, with some 40% of consumer brands using shoppable ads in some form. These technologies that I've just been discussing, and a pandemic that turned the word Zoom into a daily interactive activity for all of us, also are powering the mainstreaming of social commerce. Snap partnered with L'Oreal, providing 8 of its brands with beauty lenses on its desktop application. Downloaded into video conference apps, consumers can now customize their look during video calls by choosing L'Oreal lenses for their lashes, hair color, background animations, and more. Another innovation that went mainstream over the past year was the virtual sales consultation. Disruptor brands like Parachute, Burrow, Exotic Athletica, Icelandic, Lauf, and Lafleur have taken the retail consultants who would have been in retail stores and brought them online through video to support live customer shopping needs. Parachute reported in the middle of last year that it was making about 45 appointments per week. 60% of those customer interactions convert to immediate sales at 2 to 3 times Parachute's average order size. Bobbi Brown introduced a virtual consultation program it called Artistry Like Never Before, launched it for all shoppers in June of last year. The company said that 46% of people convert from the consultation to purchase within 3 hours, and 51%, half the customers who converted during the pilot, came back to repurchase. So I want to kind of put a fine point on this data and say that what retailers and brands are finding is that these virtual shopping experiences convert to sales better than brick and mortar shopping, and they convert to higher sales at higher prices. General Motors was perhaps the largest brand to transition to virtual consultations over the past 2 years. It launched its Cadillac Live virtual showroom in the US in December of 2019, just before the pandemic struck. This virtual showroom enabled consumers to make sales appointments and tour vehicles with experienced sales personnel from the comfort of their home, sitting in their chairs. It's part of a program GM calls Shop, Click, Drive, and that experienced site traffic growth of 50% during the pandemic. Animated by data that continue to show that all advertising growth will be centered in digital media, with almost all the shrinkage occurring in linear, non-interactive media, I'd encourage you all to ruminate on this hypothesis. Increasingly, digital advertising will be used to drive consumers to digital events and digital stores, which more and more will be the same place. Again, I want to repeat this because this is really important for every publisher in the room, every ad tech company and MarTech company that's watching this, and certainly every brand. Increasingly, digital advertising, which is most advertising now, will be used to drive consumers to digital events and digital stores. And more, the digital events and the digital stores will be the same place. This emerging reality is why Walmart and Oracle teamed up to purchase TikTok in the US, effectively creating a giant one-stop shop for entertainment, participation, and social community. Will there be more such deals? Well, yes, that deal didn't close. TikTok is still on its own with investments from these companies. There are going to be a lot of deals like this. That's the answer. Yes, we're going to see entertainment, participation, social community, and shopping merging officially, unofficially, through acquisitions, through mergers, and through partnerships. So let me leave you with 6 observations and recommendations to help you and your partners grow their brands in 2021. First, the fastest growing brands of 2021 will be storeless, data-rich, participatory, entertaining, localized, and streaming. Second, small disruptor brands will continue to chip away. All the trends in production, distribution, retailing, and marketing make small brands more competitive against large brands. Big brands' scale, their recognition, and their trust still give them significant advantages, but they can no longer rest on those scale advantages to remain competitive. Third, you cannot delay gratification. With Walmart and Amazon competing to make 2-hour delivery the norm in major markets, and with 15 to 20-minute delivery now becoming the frontier, delivery partnerships for rapid fulfillment are now essential for all brands. Fourth, while the goal of marketing remains creating a customer, that's to use the famous Ted Levitt Harvard phrase, the way to create a customer is through participation via ongoing communities, social selling, live virtual events, classes, and other forms of active involvement in the brand. These tactics are experiencing hyper growth as COVID mainstreams them, and there will be no turning back. Fifth, you must stream your way to shoppability. Since virtual engagements are increasingly replacing brick and mortar stores, media advertising increasingly will focus on driving participation in these events. Successful publishers, brands, retail brands, and experience providers will partner to promote and fulfill live experiences. They'll also partner to enable shopping directly within the experience. Fifth, you have to stream your way to shoppability. Virtual engagements are replacing stores. That means media advertising increasingly will focus on driving participation in these virtual events. Successful publishers, brands, retailers, and experience providers will partner to promote and to fulfill live experiences. And they'll also partner to enable shopping directly within the experience. Keep your eye on free ad-supporting streaming TV in particular. It's known as FAST, F-A-S-T. That stands for Free Ad-Supported Streaming Television. Very important acronym. It is a high-growth medium in the US and outside the US. And the introduction of shoppable ad formats will make it quite formidable as an advertising medium. And finally, Brands, as I've said, but I want to repeat it, brands must be data companies that make things, not the other way around. Consumer-facing companies cannot remain competitive without growing their first-party relationships and their first-party data. The complete version of this IAB 2020 and 2021 Brand Disruption Report is very, very rich. At about 150 pages, it provides more examples and more data illustrating these and several other hypotheses about brand development in the post-COVID economy. You can access it on the IAB US website. It's there for your perusal. And as I noted, our 2021-2022 report will be released at the IAB Brand Disruption Summit on November 8th and November 9th. It will be a virtual summit, and we hope you will attend.